If you get married just for the papers, that's a crime. If it's a fake marriage, that's a crime. The immigration laws are favoring family, which is a good thing, but they're not favoring employment. And we need politicians to stop debating about focusing only on the border and give solutions to companies. Otherwise, a lot of companies will go out of business.
Why do you think then, Julio, that people are so afraid that immigrants are going to like take their jobs and like get over and ahead of them? If it's so difficult for companies to go and hire other people, why is everyone so worried about immigration?
I think it's a cultural thing. One thing I would say is some people are afraid of what they don't know. So immigrants are coming from different parts of the world, backgrounds, religions, you name it, cultures. And then when you have someone that is coming from a place you don't know well, that creates conflict.
Everyone thinks people are just going across the border in Mexico, going with the cartels and doing a lot of violent stuff. But that's not the reality. Like I have some friends that he actually worked, like the example you were talking about, he came on a work visa to work as a programmer, but now his time has run out and he doesn't have a way to stay here. So for people in that situation, what is the best process that they can take to actually be able to keep their green card or their status in the US?
Well, what happens is the system is designed in a way that they are favoring family-based immigration, which I think is really important. But employment-based immigration is really important as well. So you hear like marry an American and then you get a green card. You hear that all the time. And then the system is pushing people to sham marriages, fake marriages. And that's illegal, that's a crime, but it's what happens. For example, in Silicon Valley, we had a lot of layoffs lately because of the economy. And you have a lot of really talented software developers, etc. And they only have a few days of grace period that they need to find another job and get a work immigration status. Otherwise, they will need to leave. And maybe they live here for several years. They have a mortgage. They have their kids are American that are going to school. And they need to come back to, I don't know, India or something, and they've been here more than 10 years and they were laid off. That's something that happens. They don't have a lot of time to jump into another job.
Because what is the timing that if you lose your job, do you still have that initial like 3-year period from when you came, or?
No. You can come for 3 years on one given visa like the H-1B and you can stay 3 years. But if you are fired, you need to leave in a few days, in like 2 months, you need to leave, even if the visa is for 3 years, because that visa is you can only work for that given company, for, I don't know, Facebook. And if they fire you, you need a new company to sponsor a new status and you only have a couple of months.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I thought
that's
that
really stressful.
Yeah,
We're talking like really intelligent and successful engineers that they are forcing them to leave. And we need those guys.
So what do people usually do in that situation?
They are desperate and they try to get a green card somehow. And they are like, it's a big problem. We have a lot of consultations about that. Like really successful professionals that they are not having many options. They are not. And they don't want to stay here illegally. They want to abide by the law and it's fine. It's great. But the system is isn't great, to be honest.
So what is the situation with that? And why do you think America is not saying, okay, let's find a way to get the best talent and just bring them over? If we have so many jobs, like you were mentioning that it's about 10 million jobs that we need to fill up and we don't have the people to take those jobs. What is keeping that from just changing and having a reform that actually allows us to go and get the best talent and just...
We need a legal reform and we need politicians to be have an agreement in Congress and stop debating about focusing only on the border and give solutions to companies. Otherwise, a lot of companies will go out of business if they cannot find the people. And so we need a legal reform. The labor laws in immigration, employment-based immigration has more than 40 years old. And now we have, I don't know, the creator economy. You have digital nomads. We don't have solutions for them. I get this question all the time. I'm a YouTuber from Mexico. If I enter the US, can I film in the US with a tourist visa? Is that work or not? Well, I think an officer can understand that it is work and getting paid by Google, that is an American company, during their stay in the US. And you cannot do that with a visa, with a tourist visa. But then get a work visa to do that is so complex. You need a company sponsor you. Maybe you don't qualify, or takes a lot of time. And you need to, so all these frictions is because the law is old.
So for a person in that situation, and you have a lot of people from Mexico that can come, and also a lot of people from Canada, from the UK, what you could consider like other first world countries, and those people are trying to come over here. So what's typically the process for that, and what should people do when they're trying to find a way to come to America and work here full time?
Depends on the type of job. So there are a lot of work visas that are different from people with a degree or not. Depends on the type of job. But in general, the main obstacle that in my experience people have is they need to find a company to sponsor them a visa. And when you are outside the US, it's not easy to find a company to sponsor you. So as a lawyer, when I give consultations, like people are asking me, Julio, I'm an engineer from this given country. I'm willing to work. What do I do? Well, my first question is, do you have a company to sponsor you? No. How can I find one? Well, that's a big problem.
And with those companies, what do they have to do in order to hire that person? Like, how much money do they have to pay them, or how does that work?
Well, you cannot pay less than the market. So you cannot hire an immigrant and abuse that. There are laws in place. Some companies do that, but it's illegal. And the Department of Labor will have a look at it. So they will look at the taxes of the company. So they make sure that you can pay a reasonable, salary. And then some visas have a cap limit per fiscal year. So for example, the H-1B, I don't want to bore you with numbers and letters, but that's a really important visa for professionals with a degree. You only have 85,000 per year. And the last year, there were over 700,000 applications. So there's a lottery to see who qualifies. And then, it's a little more than 10% of the applicants they have a company sponsoring them, but they don't get the job.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. And you can only apply once a year. In the middle of the year, they give the results of the lottery. And then if you are selected and approved, you can start working starting in October. So imagine if you're a company and you need an employee yesterday. You need to go through this process, apply in April only, pray that your future employee or potential employee is being selected, and then he or she will start working in October. But I need that in February.
Yeah, but the time you probably hire 2 people here in the US by the time that comes around.
Yeah, and maybe you don't find a qualifying employee to do the job because you cannot find it in the market.
So this idea that if immigrants come over, they're just going to take our jobs and they're going to put us they're going to put out the Americans, because I'm also an immigrant.
Yeah.
They're going to put out the Americans out of a job and just destroy the economy. That's totally false.
Well, again, I'm talking to companies that they cannot find Americans to perform the job. They offer the job. Nobody's taking it. So yeah, no. I mean, in some other companies, maybe there are American engineers. And if you bring engineers from other countries, they are competing. That's true. But in other areas like, agriculture, there's a big crisis there. Like agricultural companies, they're having a hard time finding people in the US to do that job that is really tough. It's not for everyone. And it's a really important job. We depend on that, on the agriculture, and who's doing the job? Nobody wants to do it. And the visas are limited. And again, the system has a lot of friction. And outside the US, there are a lot of people that would be happy to do that job.
So now, how do you think the next election cycle, and we're going into a new year, and everything is usually around this party division? One party wants to completely ban immigration, and another party wants to be a little bit more lax because they're trying to appease to immigrants who they want their votes. So how do you think immigration and this labor crisis is going to play out as we get closer to a cycle of elections?
Yeah, so we're going to see some increase in debates in this topic. Immigration is always a hot topic when we are in an election period. President Biden had a lot of promises during his previous campaign that he could not fulfill. He promised a reform, a really important reform. He sent that to Congress. He didn't have the numbers to do that. And then I see a lot of frustration in at least the Latin American community and their family members that were like, hey, we were expecting some solutions and you didn't give us that. So I think if the current president does not have the numbers in Congress, which he doesn't, he has a few things that he can offer, like one thing called TPS. They just gave it to Venezuela. So it's basically a temporary status with a work permit. That's not a permanent status. It's a temporary status. It's like a minor solution, I would say. But yeah, so we will have from both parties, different proposals, but you will see that they will probably focus on the border crisis, which is a crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis. People at the border are dying. We see cartels there in the Mexican side. We see Mexican immigration officers extorting immigrants. There are reports that say that. And
well, no, not reports. Like my brother he came to America about a year ago, and he went through that entire process. So we are from Cuba, and he had to go and jump over all of these countries. And we paid off different people, different cartels and stuff. And it was crazy. Like he had to fight off the cartels and also the police from Mexico because there is so much corruption, and that is very complicated. So like, how do you think we got to this point, and how are we going to solve this issue between the US and Mexico specifically? Because we don't have that issue with Canada, but we have it with Mexico. What is at play there, and how can we fix it?
Unfortunately, I don't see a solution soon. Politicians are trying all sorts of stuff, building a wall, giving incentives or legal pathways to some Latin American countries. But the truth is, Latin America is many Latin American countries are suffering a lot. And when you see the history of humankind, it's really hard to stop immigration with a law or with a wall. It's really tough to do that. People will find a way anyway because they're running away from difficult things. Like I speak with people daily that they are suffering persecution. I don't know, we won a case 2 days ago, someone from Nicaragua that is escaping persecution for that dictatorship. And that person is going to come because if he stays in Nicaragua, he's a dead person. And that person is willing to travel through the desert, through the Rio Bravo, the river, and risk his life because he's dead otherwise. And what are you going to do with that? Like, it's really hard to stop. There are not incentives for that person not to try. And so we don't have enough judges, also immigration judges, for the amount of cases out there. There are millions of cases and only a few immigration judges. And so we also are seeing like cases are taking a lot of time, many years with a pending case. A lot of people don't have a case. They're just winning time and getting a work permit. And other people are really escaping from persecution and they need to wait many years for an outcome in their case. So it's a big problem. And I don't see, honestly, given the geopolitical situation, the economies in Central America and South America, I don't see the incentives there to stop immigration right now. The current administration proposed a few things that some are working, some are not. But I don't see a solution in the short period. And politicians from both sides will use that topic in the electoral process. You will see that for sure, as we always see.
The part that I don't understand is if you have someone that comes through and however they come to the US, once they're here, if they're going to stay here and if you're accepting them, why don't they have a simple solution to give them a work permit and a way to pay taxes? Because when I think about it, it's like if you have this person, they're willing to do a job. If they do that job, whatever business they're working for is going to have more labor. So they're going to produce more. They're going to make money. They can make money. They can pay taxes. You can raise like whatever money the government is making from taxes instead of keeping someone for like 9 months, a year, 18 months. So you're just paying all of these people in the government to keep having these cases. Like whenever we go to the immigration court, it's for nothing. Yeah. Like we go there, the whole building is full with people and all you do is you come in, they look at your paper and they say, oh, come back in 3 months. Yeah. Like what is the point and why someone is not just saying, let's just stop all of this and make a difference, like change it?
I think the one reason that some people say is if you give an easy solution, then you're giving more incentives for more people to come, and they want to deter people from coming. So if you make things easy, then more people will come. I think that's the rationale behind it. At the same time, I speak with people all during like my week, all day, that they have a pending immigration, like asylum case, for example, and by law, you cannot get a work permit before 6 months. So you have a person who is about, like, doing things according to the law. They are, submitting the case before a judge. They are going to their court dates, and they need to wait at more than 6 months to get a work permit. And what is that person doing in the meantime? They are not authorized to work, but they need to survive, especially in this economy that is not cheap. You're coming from another country, maybe you don't speak the language, you don't know anyone, and you are 6 months at least at the minimum before you get a work permit. And what are you doing with that person? Like, again, that's a legal reform that probably Congress needs to debate. But at the same time, they will counter argue, if we do that, more people will come if you give work permits right away. So what they did is they created these humanitarian programs for a few countries: humanitarian parole for Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, some reunification for family in pending green cards for another Latin American countries, TPS, which is a temporary status for Venezuelans that are living in the US, and they give them a work permit. Again, these are some solutions, but they're not solving. And I, honestly, in all honesty, I don't know if the U.S. can solve it, because we are dealing with big issues in Latin America. So right now we have dictators in 3 Latin American countries: Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. And we have economic crisis and gangs all across the continent. We are seeing a rise in criminal organizations and drug dealing in Peru and Ecuador. I'm having consultations with Peruvians and people from Ecuador daily that they're escaping from extortion. And those, honestly, are not the best asylum cases, but it's what they can, seek for. So I don't know. It's a big issue.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you about that program of having the temporary status
Yeah.
for those countries. Because in my case, like, I want to do that with my family.
Okay.
So, like, every time I talk to my dad about it, I don't have all the information. I have read a little bit about it, but I feel like I don't know if I'm able to do it. Like, can you just explain how that process goes? Because I feel like there's a lot of people like me who have lived here for many, many years.
Yeah.
And for us, we know there's a very complicated, daunting task.
Yeah.
So can you touch on that a little bit and give some guidance?
Absolutely. There are a couple of programs. One is the humanitarian parole. Basically, you need someone with a legal status here in the U.S., a U.S. citizen, a permanent resident, someone with a lawful status here, that needs to be the sponsor of the person from Cuba, from Venezuela, Haiti, or Nicaragua, to bring them here. And then you start the process as a sponsor. You need to submit information to show that you can take care of the expenses, basically, living expenses of that person. It doesn't need to be a family member. It's just someone with a lawful status. And then that person can enter the U.S. legally via the airport. And have a work permit here in the U.S. For Cuba, the good thing is Cuba, since 1996, has this amazing program called El Ajuste Cubano, the Cuban adjustment. Mm-hmm. So if you enter legally, after a year, you can adjust status and basically get a green card. So you can combine these 2 programs. So entering with humanitarian parole, which is a legal way of entering the country, and then adjusting after a year. That's for Cuba. Venezuela doesn't have an adjustment like that. There are some rumors, but they don't have that. Yeah. Venezuela has the TPS, which stands for Temporary Protected Status, that the president has the power to unilaterally, without going through Congress, to give people from a certain country that is facing climate crisis, political crisis, a dictatorship, they can give you this temporary status, which means they won't deport you. You can stay legally, and you can have a work permit and also apply for a travel permit. So that's a good news for Venezuelans. But again, this is not giving you a permanent status. It's something that is temporary. But these things are things that the president is doing because he couldn't pass the reform. So, because he needs the Congress to do that. He doesn't need the Congress for TPS or humanitarian parole. And again, now we have legal challenges in court because there are some states here in the US that are challenging that, saying these programs are illegal. And we will see the judges making a decision eventually. And in the meantime, you have people in the middle that have this stressful situation. You know, you're an immigrant, I'm an immigrant. Leaving your country is not easy, it's stressful. And if you don't know the path, you don't know what's going to happen. And maybe you need to come back to your country after that. It's stressful. It's really stressful.
That would be a nightmare. Like I literally had nightmares when I first came to America. And for like 4 to 6 months, I used to wake up in the middle of the night, and I used to have these dreams where I was back in Cuba and I was like trying to hijack a plane to like come back.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was like very stressed out because I was like in the dream, I was like, why did are you stupid? Like, you knew you didn't have your green card yet. Like, why did you go back? Which it would have been impossible. Like, I couldn't travel anyway. So it's something that a lot of the times people don't understand, that yes, it is a great opportunity to come to America and to be here, but it's also very disconcerting, and it throws you off in ways that you cannot really even understand, even when you're going through it. And I'll be interested to know like some of the stories of the people that you have worked with, and how does immigration, and not only for people in Latin America, like anyone from any other country, even if it's a better country, come in here, and what does that displacement do to your like emotions and like your well-being?
It's really challenging. You know, especially if you're coming with kids, for example, you don't know how to get a driver license, open a bank account. You're not, in some instances, as I mentioned, with asylum seekers, for some time you're not authorized to work. Like, I was lucky enough to move because I wanted to do, and I wanted to move, and it was stressful for me. So I cannot imagine if I'm forced to escape from persecution. Like, for example, we won a case the other day from a guy from Iran. And the Revolutionary Guard wanted to kill him because he converted to Christianism. And imagine, so if he gets deported, if we lose that case, that guy is going to die. He will be dead. And we were facing a judge that was denying 80% of the cases. We already knew that. So we were preparing the appeal. And luckily, thank God, we won that case. But imagine, like, if he comes back to Iran, they will kill this guy. So these are the challenges. It's not a game. It's not, you know, it's a big issue. And being in the shoes of an immigrant that doesn't have the family here, doesn't have a job, barely speaks the language, is really tough, and an emotional place. Like, sometimes we are, as lawyers, we function as psychologists. Like for example, when I started my law firm, we went with my business partner to buy, you know, paper, chairs, and all the stuff to create the office. And he would say, we should buy tissues. I was like, why? I was a lawyer for a long time. It's like, because people will cry, and you will cry. And sometimes I use it. I cry with the client sometimes. You know, because I heard stories that you wouldn't believe me, like the worst thing a human being can make, like sexual slaves, kidnapping, human trafficking, you name it. Like, I heard it all, and it's really, really, really tough. Like, and sometimes you have kids involved, and sexual abuse, domestic violence, you know, and we operate as psychologists sometimes. You know, it's, you do the best job that you can do. I'm not trained to be a psychologist. I'm a lawyer, but you have to be that. Like, and this never happened to me when I was doing other type of areas of the law, like business law, contracts. Like, it was just a matter of money, or, you know. Yeah. But here is like the lives of these people depend on the outcome of the process, and that's tough.
Yeah. How did you end up being an immigration lawyer?
Good question. Like, long story short, like, I was working in my law firm in Argentina. I worked with my father. And when I was admitted to study here at UCLA, and when I was deciding the subjects that I would study, I was thinking about contracts, business associations, constitutional law that I always liked. And my father, he said, you should study immigration. I was like, why? Like, well, the U.S. is the #1 country in the world with immigrants. You speak Spanish, and you're a native Spanish speaker, so I think you can make a difference there. I was like, okay. Then I started law school. Immediately, my friends were the Spanish, the Mexicans, the Colombians. Immediately those are your friends. And I made one of my friends was from Spain, Alfonso, and he said, you should do immigration with me. I was like, oh, my dad said the same. So I signed up in the class, and I sat down next to Alfonso, my friend, and who is right now my business partner, Gianfranco. He's Italian-American. And that was the story. We had an amazing professor. We got to go to the border, to the detention centers. I was with the Border Patrol in their SUVs, and seeing all these tunnels that the drug cartels are creating to cross the border. It was really interesting, and well, that was basically the story. I thought I could do something in this area of the law and change lives, which is my main mission, and try to help as many people as I can. And I thought that like it was obvious for me. Now that I look back, it was obvious that I had to do this, but by the time I was making decisions, it wasn't. But I put myself out there, and things started to happen. I started to meet people, and things aligned. So yeah, that was basically the story.
So I'm curious to know, how do you handle the business side of running a law firm, and then your emotional side of you're helping all these people, and you know what it feels to go through that, but then you're also running a business and you need to make money.
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
Well, it's a battle, and sometimes because what I know is we have to choose the battles. I know we cannot help everyone. I try to help as many people as I can, creating content for free, people that will never be my client, and it's fine. It's part of the responsibility that I think I have. And then, I have over 20 employees. I need to pay salaries. I need to pay taxes, and I need to live as well. So it's a balance between trying to have a profitable business, because a lot of families depend on that. And at the same time, I need to stay in business to help people. If I don't stay in business, I won't be able to help people. And it's how it works. So yeah, that's the mindset. So we also see the market, how much a given case costs, and we try when we can to offer payment plans if we see that it's a person that is having a hard time, paying. So we try to be flexible as much as we can and offer some financial solutions to people if we can. But yeah, sometimes it's an issue because sometimes people cannot afford us. U.S. lawyers are expensive. Lawyers in California are probably the most expensive in the world.
Why?
Because that's the market. It's how it operates. So supply and demand. And
is it because you don't have enough lawyers to cover all the demand of like the cases that you have in the state?
Possibly, yeah. And also, I'm talking in general, like lawyers in general. In immigration law, like in general, there are 1.3 million lawyers in the US, but only between, I would say, around 20,000 out of 1.3 million do immigration.
Wow.
Out of which, I don't know how many speak Spanish and are immigrants and, native Spanish speakers. That's why I think we're doing well, because we resonate with people. But yeah, I think we are like a T-Rex. We are like an extinct species in a way, and that's part of the responsibility that I think we have as well. We are not many out there. Yeah. That's why I also create free content daily, because I cannot take all the cases, like, unfortunately, but it's what it is. Yeah. I need to choose the battles.
So tell me about that. Julio, you're a very famous YouTuber. Like right now, when you think about it, your channel isn't in the top, 1% of all lawyers in America, I would dare to say, because you have a lot of content, you have a lot of followers. How did you stumble upon that? And I guess let's not talk about how did you start it, blah, 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 because that's kind of boring.
Yeah.
What is the thing that you feel that you have cracked that allowed you to blow up so quickly?
I think there are many factors. One, I think my niche is in high demand. They need information, and it's a life-changing thing. That's one thing. Then I think I have Spanish channels and English channels. They're both doing well, fortunately. But I'm, in a way, in the good sense of the term, I'm obsessed with understanding my audience. So I spend a lot of time reading the comments, their concerns, their doubts, and then I try to give them content to solve those concerns. Also, I think one thing that is working is the fact that I try to speak in a simple way, not as a lawyer. Of course, when you need to give a specific term, words are important, obviously. But I try to speak in a simple way to be understood by a lot of people. Like that's a thing that I think we're doing right. Then we are consistent. So I post a lot of content. I call it like the machine gun strategy versus the sniper strategy. So we post a lot. That gives me a lot of data. I read the data all the time. I do a lot of experiments. Sometimes I do a format to see if it works. Maybe it doesn't, maybe it does. So I'm not afraid of putting myself out there and creating content. And then I try to see the people that are following us, not as a follower, but as a part of a community. And they are part of that. It's not like me saying things and people receiving the information, period. No, I try to go live and engage in conversation, and I highlight comments, and I try to involve people in the discussion. I don't want it to be me saying stuff and that's it. No, I try to create a community, and I think we're doing that. Like right now we have the largest immigration community in the world. We passed 10 million followers a few days ago, which is 1 billion views, which is, I don't understand those numbers, you know, I just don't understand that. But I think it's a matter of creating a lot, understanding your audience in a deeper way, or at least as deep as you can, and being consistent and experimenting. That's part of the formula, I think.
Yeah, that's really impressive. And how many lawyer friends told you that you were crazy when you started doing that kind of stuff?
A few. Actually, I thought I was a little crazy when we had a marketing consultant and he said, Julio, you should do TikTok. This is a few years ago. And my stupid answer was, but I'm a lawyer. Meaning, like, I was a lawyer at that point for, I don't know, over 10 years. I worked in the judiciary, in the Congress. And what am I going to do on TikTok? This is for little kids dancing. And I'm a lawyer. But that idea, I kept that idea, and I started doing research. I've seen some accomplished professionals, colleagues, and other business owners on TikTok providing value, and I was like, why not? So I put myself out there. I did research first, and the first video blew up, and it never stopped. Like, the first video blew up. And now I look at that video and I recognize a lot of mistakes that I made, but the topic is in high demand. So I think that even if my video wasn't perfect, people appreciated it because the information was valuable for them. There's not a lot of information there. And then it's a matter of creating trust, because at the end of the day, without that, there's nothing. And it's my name at stake. So we are really focusing on trying to give the most perfect piece of information that we can. And we research a lot before putting content out there, because we know a lot of people are trusting me with these topics that are serious. And I don't want to give information that could be misleading or, sensational. Like, you always have the temptation that I know that if I put some words, the video will perform. But sometimes, that's not ethical, because I know that words will create misinformation. And you see a lot of people on TikTok, on other social media platforms, giving information about immigration. They are not lawyers. They don't know the topic, but they know that can go viral. And some are scammers also. That's true. We have over 300 accounts impersonating me only on TikTok, scamming people.
Oh, wow.
So that's out there. And we are blocking and reporting daily, but it's nonstop. So that's a big problem. These are scammers that are taking advantage sometimes of vulnerable immigrants. It's serious crime.
Yeah, that's terrible. And it's people that they're really putting all of their money into this, because this means everything for them.
Absolutely.
So what are some of those topics that you have seen that are the most relevant that people really want to listen about?
When you talk about the border, because that resonates not only here in the US, but all across Latin America, and people are desperate for information. I get messages daily asking for the situation at the border right now, because people are You know that they're trying to
Yeah.
see is this the right moment or not, because regulations change all the time, and it's not the same to enter now than to enter before May. The regulations changed a lot, and now it's tough to get it through the border, and so I see a lot of people talking about that topic because they know that can go viral, and I see a lot of misinformation. That's why I think I have this with my colleagues as well, this big responsibility. I always tell them that, to create content for the people, free content. Some of them will hire you, but some don't, and I don't know. That's my mindset. Is what I think. Uh, Anyone can think whatever they want, but at the end of the day, what I see is that I have more than I can chew. Like I choose the clients because we have thousands of leads. Like, just to give you numbers, like since last Friday, I got over, I would say, 200 qualified leads for asylum. 200 people that I know they already probably qualify as a client if we reach an agreement. I cannot represent all of them. I mean, I'm growing. My business is growing. I have lawyers working for me and an amazing team, but I cannot help everyone.
You need to start bringing lawyers from another country and start doing that on your own.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's not easy to hire a lawyer. It's a process that I need to see that he's a really good lawyer, because at the end of the day, again, my name is at stake and we are dealing with serious stuff. So I cannot hire any lawyer. It wasn't easy to hire lawyers, and it's not cheap at all. Here in the US, it's really expensive. So if you want a quality lawyer, it's not going to be cheap. And it's an important, as a business owner, it's a critical decision to hire a lawyer at this point. Like my law firm is kind of new. Has 3 years. It's not, and I started in COVID, so we're doing well, but still, hiring people it's not an easy decision. And hiring lawyers, man, they have a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Now, on your audience, on the English side of the English speakers, what is the biggest difference that you see from the content and the things that resonate with people who speak English and the people who speak in Spanish?
Yeah.
Because even for me with this interview, like, because of my audience that I've built is all in English, I had to do the interview in English.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, man, like, all the people that actually can benefit are the people who speak Spanish. Yeah. But in your case, now you're venturing off on creating content on the English side too. So what are the issues that English speakers are dealing with regarding immigration that you can actually see a way to help those people?
For what I've seen in the comments and the data, I would say my English channels, people are really concerned about the border. And that's a geographic thing, because Latin America is next to the US. But the English channels are basically people from Asia, Europe, or Africa, and they want to work in the US. That's their main concern. And then you have family-based cases. For example, a family member that is living in the US and they want to petition a fiance or their parents that are in Africa or in Asia or Europe. So I would say my English channels are more about family-based immigration and employment-based immigration. And the Spanish channels are more asylum, family, obviously, and work. Like, my Spanish channels are about everything, but the English ones, not a lot about the border.
Yeah. Now, in that case of the family immigration, especially with the Fiance thing, because I worked on a TV show that you might have heard about called 90 Day Fiance. I was a production assistant on that show, and then I was a camera assistant and a production coordinator.
Successful show.
It was a nightmare. Working on the show was like, it was an emotional roller coaster just to be around that whole drama and all of that. Yeah. Because for people who don't know the show, you have an American person that is going to another country. It could be Latin America, or many times they went to Russia or places like that. Yeah. And then they find someone that they like, and they basically do like, sometimes it's like a business transaction when they're just doing it to help that person come over here. Some other times people actually like fall in love and stuff like that. It's kind of crazy. But what are the steps or the processes that people have to go through when you are an American citizen or resident and you want to bring over someone that you fell in love with, and you want to do that? Yeah,
it's not easy. There are basically two tools that you can use. If you are an American, not a permanent resident with a green card, only Americans can petition with a K1 visa. It's called a Fiance visa. And it used to be a great tool because before the pandemic, it could take 6 months. Right now, it's taking over 14, 15 months. And then your fiancé enters the US with the intention to get married to the American within 90 days. And then the American needs to petition the green card, and then that can take another year. So it's not really convenient because you need to wait more than a year and then enter, marry, and wait another year. The other way is to get married somewhere outside the US because your fiancé cannot enter. Mm-hmm. You get married in Mexico or I don't know, wherever. And then as a spouse, you start the green card process through their consulate. That depends on the consulate, can take over a year or two, but they enter with a green card. They enter and get the green card right away. They don't need to marry and start a green card process in the meantime. So in simple words, before the pandemic, the K1, the fiancé visa was good because you get to enter quite quickly and then you start the process like living here. Now, the K1 visa is not a good option, in my opinion, if it's taking over so many months. So it's probably better just to get married and start the green card right away and then wait. But that will depend on the consulate and the specific case.
Do you have a better chance that if you get married before you start the process, that they would be more trusting that the relationship is actually real versus doing the K1 visa and bringing a fiance to maybe get married later?
That's a really intelligent question because once you're married to an American, that's a special family category, an immediate relative that is really important and favored in the law and in the processes. On the other side, if you are not yet married, you don't have that special relationship. She or he is not an immediate relative. And then, the process is slow. The government here, for some reasons, can suspend the program, or the consulate is not processing the interview, so it's taking more time. But when you're dealing with the spouse of an American, then that's a different story. That's why I like it more at the moment. That can change, obviously. Mm-hmm. Hopefully. I hope it changes because the Department of State said a couple of years, a year and a half ago, the K1 visa, the fiancé visa, would be second priority in consulates, and they didn't do anything about that. And then they reversed that back, and we are stuck in these long months of wait, and people are frustrated. Imagine you want to marry, and you need to wait a year and a half in some instances to get with your loved one and get married and start your family. It's frustrating.
Yeah. Well, I bet there's a lot more cases of that happening because of this phenomenon. I don't know if you have heard about the passport bros. Have you heard about that?
No, what's that?
You haven't heard about the passport bros?
So, sounds like a scam, but tell me.
Yeah, well, I'm just making speculation here, but with the relationship of the cases with the passport bros. So passport bros is this tendency now that American guys who are not really good looking or outgoing, they have a hard time with women here in America. Yeah. They just go to another country on vacation or for a week or to like live there for a little bit. And now because they're Americans and they get paid in USDs, now they can go and like fancy whatever women they would want. And I'm pretty sure that a bunch of those guys are gonna end up falling in love with some beautiful Argentinian or Colombian girl, and then all of those cases are gonna skyrocket. So I was curious to know if you have heard about anything like that.
This has been going for ages. I didn't know the term, but this practice.
I think you need to make a video on this, Julio.
Yeah, maybe. No, I haven't heard the specific term, but the concept is not a new thing. But yeah, of course, the American citizenship is well regarded across the world. You have people, for that reason, like the US is the #1 country for immigrants in the world to this day. And so, yeah, I can see that. But again, for the audience, for a green card process with an American, it has to be based in love, in a real relationship. Otherwise, you're entering into criminal activity. If you get married just for the papers, just for that's a crime. If it's a fake marriage, that's a crime. We know a lot of people do that, and they get the green cards. And then you see Americans extorting the fake spouse, asking for money. Otherwise, they will report that fake marriage.
But if they report it, don't they get in trouble too?
They can, but in practice, they won't. Because the law in place says 5-year prison term You can have a fine of $250K. But they rarely enforce that. What they enforce is that they may take your green card away. Or at least, the immigrant doesn't know, and the American is extorting just as a bluff. And they're asking for, and you enter in this relationship or based on extortion. Like, yeah, I help you. I already paid you, and now you want more money. And it's like, yeah, give me the money or I will go and report this. And we see that a lot.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about that side of the
It's common practice.
Yeah, what I hear is that it's very difficult to be able to find someone that would be willing to do that because the risk is so high. Because when you think about $250,000, that's an insane amount of money.
Of course.
And then the risk of going to prison 5 years. I mean, even 1 year, nobody wants to do that.
1 week.
So how do people do it and get away with that? Because like, how do they keep a straight face? What's the process there? Like when you apply for that, do you go somewhere and like there is someone like you and you're like, I want to see if I can catch if this is fake or not?
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly that. You have an interview, especially if the marriage is within the last 2 years. You have a strict interview. If there are not kids like from the couple, then they will look. If you have children in common, like I always say, that's the best evidence that the relationship is real. But most people don't have kids when they just married and newlyweds. And so you have an officer, an immigration officer from USCIS, conducting an interview. They may separate you and interview separately to see if you're lying. And they can ask you whatever they want. For example, what's the color, the toothbrush color of your spouse? What side of the bed is she sleeping? Who bought the dog that you have? How much did the dog cost? What was the food in the wedding? Who paid for that? They can ask for whatever. So people, what they do, they train. They live together for a few weeks or months just to get a sense of how it's living to other person. And some get away with it. Of course, USCIS officers are trained to spot liars, but sometimes people get away with it. And if the marriage is new, they don't give you a final green card. They give you a conditional green card for 2 years. And then you may have another interview after 2 years to see if the marriage is still ongoing and with more questions.
What happens if you get divorced in that time?
There are some exceptions. You can get divorced and still get the green card even if you divorced. You can do that. Also, if the American spouse is, abusing the immigrant, there are solutions for the immigrants to still get the green card. Because we see that sometimes there's a disbalance of power in the relationship between the American and the immigrant, because the American has the key to open, the green card for the spouse, and then you have this disbalance. And there's a specific law for this called VAWA, which is Violence Against Women's Act, but it's also for men. If your parents, American parents, your spouse or your children abuse you as an immigrant, you can get a green card even without their help. And if you have unlawful presence or unauthorized you work without permission in the U.S., that can clean your record. So it's a good law for abused people, for domestic violence.
Have you ever had to represent someone in the case where they're trying to do a marriage, but it's like a fake marriage, and now they're got in trouble, and now you have to help them?
We, as lawyers all across the U.S., I'm a California lawyer, but this applies to every lawyer in the U.S., we are subject to ethical rules of professional responsibility. If I find out it's a fake case, I don't take the case. My license is at risk. So imagine, I will not ever take a single risk. So it's my responsibility to interview people and see if they are telling the truth. If I feel like this case is not real, I will never touch that. Yeah. I get this question a lot of times in consultations saying, well, yeah, I want to work in the US, but the work visas are not easy. I heard that I can marry. And it's like, don't do that. That's a crime. I have the responsibility to tell you that's a crime. Be careful. Don't do it. And if you want to do the case, I will not take that case. I tell them that right away. No, I will never touch that at all. And I encourage people not to do it, not because it's a good thing to do. Abide by the law is a crime. And every time I say this in social media, I had a lot of people say, yeah, but my cousin Pedrito got the green card that way. Yeah, I know. There are also homicides out there. That doesn't mean they're lawful, But yeah, as we spoke before, You can see easily that the immigration laws are favoring family, which is a good thing, but they're not favoring employment. And so the solution for a lot of people is getting married, because if you're getting married to an American, that cleans a lot of the immigration record. If you overstay a visa, if you work without authorization, if you marry an American, then you can get a green card quite fast, and also that can clean your record. That's why a lot of people are getting married. That's the reason why.
Have you ever represented anyone that was doing that had to get deported, and how did you handle that?
A lot of times, I would say weekly. When you're in immigration court, if you don't go to court, you get a deportation in absence. And if you lose the case, you get a deportation. You need to appeal. But yeah, it's tough. You need to explain the consequences to the client right away and plan the strategy when you see that you have a tough judge or a tough case. And when I screen people at first to see if we can work together, my like at the end of the day, it's a judge that is deciding. It's not me. So that's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to screen the case and say, okay, John, I think you have a tough case and probably you will lose. You have a chance. It will depend on many factors, but you have a really tough case. Sometimes I don't take those cases. If I think I can make a difference, sometimes I take it. But for example, today I had a consultation with someone that is lost. She was in the US. She doesn't have grounds for persecution for asylum. She doesn't have a case. And she wanted me to be the lawyer for that asylum case. And I didn't take the case. I explained her the consequences. I gave her a few, I explained the law for her and the process. But I said, I'm sorry, I'm not taking this case. And then I after her, I had another case that was really strong. And I think we can make a difference there. It will depend on the judge, obviously. But with my experience, I can tell if this is a case that has a chance, Then things go wrong, or maybe the judge makes a mistake. It happens. We all make mistakes. Lawyers, judges, prosecutors, and then sometimes the client is not. Their testimony is not great because they are nervous and they make mistakes, and sometimes the judge thinks the client, the person is lying, and maybe they're not lying. They're confused, especially while describing traumatic events. You get there are studies by psychologists that say that when you suffer a traumatic experience, your brain tries to forget that. But now, with asylum, you need to remember as many details as you can. Dates, names, facts. So you need to remember the traumatic experience. And that's not easy, and that's confusing. That's why you need to work ahead, write down everything, especially the declarations, and work ahead. And like I always tell the clients, you need to know the case from A to C, like even better than the judge, even better than me. You need to know it because they will ask you, and the interrogation would be, they will ask you the same things in many ways to see if you're lying. And as I say, it's not only you need to be truthful, but you also need to appear truthful.
Yeah, which is very complicated.
Absolutely.
Because it's almost like acting in a way, but you have to not be acting because you don't want them to think that you're lying or pretending. Mm-hmm. And it's very complicated. I remember when I went to my first court. So in my case, I came through Canada. Yeah. So I went to a film festival in Canada, and then I ran away from the festival and I went to the border and I turned myself in at the border and I said, hey, I'm Cuban and I want to come to America. And then the officer was like, what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? Like, where's your visa? And I'm like, no, I'm coming from Cuba. I want to do the Cuban adjustment law. Yeah. And I go to get out of the car, and the guy gets his gun. He's like, wow, get back in the fucking car. Wow. Like, he got really afraid that I was going to do something. So we end up going into this little border control booth, because I didn't want to go to the big main place, because I saw on the map that it was on the Canadian side of the little line, and I was like, I'm not gonna risk it. I was afraid that they were gonna send me back to Canada. So these people have no idea. It was just two officers. It was getting dark, and they were afraid that I was a terrorist because I'm coming from Cuba. So they ended up making a bunch of phone calls, and then they, at the end of the night, they're like, welcome to America. Like it's all good. Like you can come in. But then I had to go to court, and I had a deportation case,
Yeah.
and I was so afraid. I thought that they were gonna send me back to Cuba.
Yeah.
And I remember it took about a month for me to have to go to court. And I come from like a third world country, and then I'm in America, which is like
Yeah.
night and day.
Paradise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also very overwhelming
Yeah.
because like I remember I went to a Walmart,
Oh
and
yeah.
I was like, I had never seen that many cars in one place at the same time in my life. And then I have to go to Atlanta for the court, and you have all of these big buildings, and I'm afraid that they're going to send me back. So I remember I had to go inside, and I didn't have a lawyer. It was just me and a friend that I was staying at his house.
Most people don't have a lawyer in court.
Yeah. So I'm afraid because I'm thinking I need a lawyer, but I didn't have money for a lawyer, and I didn't even know where to find a lawyer that knew about Cuba because I was in Tennessee.
Yeah.
So we go to the thing, and they're bringing people dressed in like orange jumpsuits and like shackles. And like I'm sitting next to those people, and I'm like, this is bad. So I was so like nervous, Julio. I was like, my heart was beating. Like I was like, and I have always been good with words and talking in public and all that. I was fried. Like I got up, I was like so nervous, and I
Absolutely.
just like mumble a few words. And the judge kind of knew, like when I said that I was Cuban and he saw my file, he knew that he said something like, not all immigrants are equal. In your case, you being from Cuba, there's something special about you guys. So come back in like 6 months, and like your case will continue. Da, 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 da. So he basically gave me an extension
Yeah.
without me even asking, because he knew the whole extent of the law and all of that. So I felt like really relieved after that. But I don't know how we can bridge the gap between people that are coming from another country and going through that, and then people who have lived here their entire lives, and they're honestly just afraid that some immigrants are going to come and like destroy their country. Like I also understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense to feel afraid about that because it's people that you don't know, and it's also it. I don't think it's even about being racist or anything evil like everyone pretends that that is. It's just like if you have different people in your house and you're not used to them, you feel weird. And sometimes I also don't agree with immigrants that will come to America and not assimilate in some way. Like I understand you have to keep your culture, but if you are coming to America, I believe that now if you want to be an American, you do need to bring your best effort to become an American in the whole extent of the word. And for me, it's very disconcerting, especially with people from the Middle East, when they keep their entire dresses and all that. I'm not from America, and even I feel some type of way, even when I don't want to feel that way. It's like a biological instinct with something that we have some way somehow because of other events relate that to danger. And it's very difficult to be in the middle where you're trying to keep your heritage and your culture from your country, but now you're in a different place and you need to assimilate, but you don't want to just forget where you came from. And you have this weird in between. So in your case, you being from Argentina, was it difficult like to come to America and go through that, or were you able to like assimilate to that in an easy way?
Um, I always loved this country. I had my aunt living in Miami for decades, so I would come since I was a kid, and I always admired this country in many ways. So for me, first it was coming as a student for my master's degree, so I made a lot of friends here. So in my experience, it wasn't that traumatic, the assimilation. And I lived in other countries besides Argentina and the US. And I always had this mindset that you are describing that try to assimilate. For example, I lived in England. And when I was living there, I had my Argentinian friends, but I tried to meet people like locals. You know, I want to know. I was always curious for people that are not from my country. I love my country, men and women, but I want to know other cultures. I was always curious about that, and so I always had. I like to think I always had an open mind in that regard. You know, try to understand the culture in the place that is hosting me, and I was always like having this mindset of trying to make friends from the place and understand the rules. And for example, in Argentina, driving is chaotic. It's like the jungle. If you want to drive, it's like you need to survive, you know. And I was trained to drive like that. And here in the U.S., in some places, not everywhere, it's more like
Very peaceful affair.
and respectful. And I was like, Julio, you are not in Argentina. Also, for example, in Argentina, pedestrians, by law, they have a lot of rights, but in reality, they don't. Like, if you're driving, they will stop and let you pass with a
But
car.
in America, it's different.
No.
American, like,
Yeah.
the people walk and like they own the road.
Yeah, exactly. So that you need to, Julio, sometimes it happens to me, like I stop in a stop sign, I see someone crossing really slowly. I was like, if you were in Argentina, you will be thanking me for waiting, you know? But those stuff, like that minor things, you need to, if you move to a country, that's my opinion, everyone's free to do whatever they want, but I want to, if this country is generous enough, and the US is really generous in immigration, sometimes it can be tough, and we describe that scenario. But in other ways, the US is really generous, and we have millions of immigrants living here with a lot of opportunities that their countries did not give them. And so I'm really grateful for the US in many ways, not only for me, but also what it's doing in many, many aspects. There are mistakes, yes. There are things that can be done better, yes. There's a need for legal reform, yes. But still, the bright side, this country is hosting people that are escaping persecution. We won an asylum case from someone from Nicaragua, persecuted by Ortega, the dictator there, and we just won asylum, and this person will have a green card, and now he can petition his children, and they have a new opportunity in life in this beautiful country. So, I don't know. I have this mindset, but that doesn't mean that there are things that can be done better. Yes, and we need to fight for that because it's a just cause, in my opinion.
Yeah. Now, can we try to understand the argument from the other side? Let's say that you have to defend the idea of do not allow any more immigrants into America. What are the points that made that argument make sense and a strong part of the population that might feel that way? Why is that happening?
Well, I mean, if I put myself in their shoes, I see we have the number one economy in the world. It took a lot of effort. I pay that's the argument. I pay taxes, and I don't want people to abuse the system. Also, it's in human. I'm not sure if it's human nature, but it's common, and this happened to you when you see people from Muslim countries. It's natural when you see someone and is so different from you in their way of dressing or whatever, or speaking, to feel like, oh, is this going to hurt me or not? Like, who is this person? Is the unknown, And so I understand that really well. But I feel like there are good and bad people everywhere. That's what I think. And yeah.
So there is not really a factual element that we could say we should stop all immigration because X, Y, and Z, or like because this many people are abusing the system, like a hard, concrete evidence that we could use to support that side of the argument.
Well, in some job positions, maybe there are Americans willing to do the job, and you're bringing people from outside, and I understand that some people are like concerned because they won't be able to find a job. But we see also the other side, a lot of positions that the Americans don't want to take, and we need those positions. For example, in agriculture, in transportation, we see that daily. Labor work that is in construction that is really important and tough, and not everyone wants to do that job. And there are a lot of immigrants that want to do that, and there are U.S. companies owned by Americans that will go out of business if they cannot fill out those positions, as we discussed. I mean, we have laws in place. When you have laws in place, you have people that are abusing the laws. For example, with a fake marriage, with a fake asylum. Like, I think the law should be tough on people that are abusing the system. I feel like that way. I go by the law. I don't want people abusing the asylum system because there are people that need that. And you are filling the courts with fake cases in some cases. Mm-hmm. And you have not many judges and you have millions of cases, and some of those cases are not real. And then you have people facing persecution because of their religion, their race, their nationality, their sexual orientation, and they're waiting for years to be, to have an outcome.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to ask you something. Most immigrants vote Republican. And the funny thing is that the Republicans are the ones that always want to be really tough on the immigration laws. Why do you think that happens?
I think that happens when once you become an American and you are able to vote, otherwise you cannot vote. I see this a lot. Like immigrants want, not immigrants, some immigrants, once they become an American, they want to close the door. I've seen that. It's curious. It's like I was once driving an Uber driver from Jamaica, and there was the election between Trump and Hillary Clinton. And I asked him, who are you voting? Trump. I was like, okay, you're an immigrant from Jamaica, no? Yeah, but I'm an American now. I don't want people coming now. I was like, man, you came like as an immigrant, no? You want to close the door. That's something that happens. We see that. We see that with lawyers, to become a lawyer in the US, in any given state, you need to take a really tough exam. And in California, it's horrible. It's the bar exam. And when you're studying that exam, you suffer like crazy. Once you become a lawyer, you don't want people to have it easy. I mean, is that no, it's not my case. I want a reasonable system, but I see a lot of my colleagues, they want to keep the bar exam tough, and they suffer that, but they pass through it, and now they want it to stay the same way. I don't know. Yeah, it happens.
Yeah. I'm looking at some numbers here, trying to get like some data on this, because it's very interesting. This is from Pew Research Center.
Yeah.
And at least in California, the percentage of immigrants who identify as Republican is actually 21%.
Okay.
And 48% are Democrat, which is interesting. I thought it was going to be way less. Now in Florida, it's 26% Republican, and then it goes down from there. So I was actually wrong, thinking that most immigrants vote Republican. Why? I would have sworn that it was the opposite. I guess like all the Cubans that I know are voting Republican.
I think this is my and you correct me because you're from Cuba and you know your fellow countrymen more than me. But when you escape a communist dictator, you're probably more, Republican. I don't know, maybe.
No, 100%. At least from my experience and all of the people that I know, there's only a few people that are more leaning towards the liberal side.
Yeah.
But we have seen the full evolvement of socialism into communism, and we know that that is terrible.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is why it's terrible. So people understand. It's not that the elites are taking the money or it just didn't work because they weren't skilled enough. What happens when you make the entire infrastructure of a country be completely run by a government is that nobody has ownership of it.
Yeah.
And because no one has ownership, no one takes care of it. And it doesn't matter how much you work or how intelligent you are and how many hours you put in, it will not work because you will get paid the same amount of money. Yeah. So that is the thing, that it just doesn't work. Even though it sounds nice, it doesn't work.
In real life, it doesn't
work. It doesn't work. And the same would happen like if you go to college and you're in a dorm and you have 10, 18-year-old kids living together, someone is going to eat all the pizza and leave you with no food, even if you're all paying for the same amount of food. It doesn't work. So we saw that. So when we come to America, we're like, whoever the guy is that is all about business and freedom and allowing us to do whatever we want, even if we're wrong, that's the guy we want. Yeah. Yeah. Now, I understand how people who live in America, who grew up in America and have only seen amazing years, they will have the tendency to think, well, but everyone should have everything that they need. Yeah. And I agree with that. At least for me, coming to America and all the help that I received when I first came. So I was on food stamps and I was receiving the government medical assistance. So those programs for people who have no money or very little income, they already work, and they're actually really good. Like I was able to buy enough food to live as if I was having the best years of my life. I was also coming from a third world country, so
Yeah.
but I was able to have enough food, and I was able to go see a doctor, and it was great. So the problem, I think, is some people will stay there way too long. For me, even when I wasn't making enough money, I decided to stop taking the food stamps because I wanted to find a way to make money on my own. So even though I didn't make enough money, like I was a student, because when I came, I started going to film school. So I was going to school full time, and then I was working on the side. So I didn't make enough money, but I decided, okay, I'm not going to do the food stamps, and I'm going to find a way to work. People who come from Cuba and usually in Florida, they stay longer on those programs, but they also don't want to depend on the government. So it's this tricky situation, but most of the time we're going to decide, hey, we want to stick with the guys that are trying to make things work and make businesses big and government small, because it's a very tricky like path. Now, what about Argentina?
Argentina is a disaster. I love my country, but it's a disaster. Like we have 60% of the children are living under the line of poverty. So we have generations to come that will be out of the labor market in a world that we are discussing AI, you know? So it's a big issue. And then you have millions of people that are living month after month from a check from the government. Social plans, they're working in the public sector. And then the private sector is shrinking. You have 20, 30-year-olds leaving the country, professionals, bilingual professionals with a university degree, leaving the country. They cannot afford a house. They are having a hard time affording to rent. Imagine, not buying.
And where do they go? What country do they go?
A lot of Argentinians, Argentina is a country of immigrants, so a lot of my fellow countrymen and women are from Italy or Spanish descendants, so they have European citizenship, so they can easily go to Europe and live there. Some, they don't have that, and they go to Australia, to the US, they go to Brazil, they go to Chile, other regional economies that are doing better than Argentina. We have insane inflation. We are top 3 in the world right now with Venezuela, and I think Lebanon with crazy inflation, nearly hyperinflation. And so it's really hard to save money. It's really hard to open a company. It's really hard. And also you are destroying what we call the work culture. The fact that you earn your money, you get ahead in life, and you afford to buy a house. That was a story of many immigrants that left the world wars in Europe and they found a home in Argentina, and they could, succeed. Right now, we have grandparents, parents, and children, or let's say children that never saw their grandparent, father or mother work. They had a plan, a social plan. And so you're destroying these people's minds because they are used to a check. And they are living in poverty with a check. They are surviving with that, and they don't want to work. And how do you turn that? It's really hard to change it, especially with the numbers of the poverty within children. These are generations of people. Like there are studies that say that if within the first 1,000 days of a person since they're born, if you don't give that person the proper nutrition and education, that brain will never form itself as a proper brain, developed brain, ever in their life, even if then they get the nutrition and education. That person is done, and they will be out of the market, the labor market. And that's a mortgage that the country has of millions of people. Someone has to pay that. Who? Taxes. And you have the private sector that is shrinking. So Argentina is a mess. We have elections now. We have one candidate that is talking about the liberty ideas, not liberals as the US, but and talking about that the size of the state should be small, that people shouldn't have these plans, the taxes should be lower, and probably he will be the next president. He's finding, his voice is finding good reach in Argentina. We will see in a few days.
As long as they don't go the socialist or the communist route.
Well, Argentina had that risk with the Kirchners, with where these corrupt politicians that were in good terms with Chavez, with the Castro, with Iran, with all these criminals, and Argentina had a serious risk of becoming, I wouldn't say a communist country because that's a lot, but going towards that route. The Kirchners tried to dominate the media and the judiciary. I was involved in a minor role with lawsuits trying to stop what they tried to do with the judiciary, trying to control the organs that were appointing and removing federal judges. And we were successful with that. But they were really close to do that because they had a lot of power in Congress and, they had a lot of money. But we stopped that, fortunately. And now I hope they lose the elections. They have a candidate that responds to them, and I hope he loses. I'm praying for that. I think he will never lose because the economy is really bad, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. They still have a lot of votes. I would say they still keep 30% of the votes, and that's a lot.
So what do you think the future is going to be for Argentina? Because I have some friends in Argentina that work with us doing media, and they're really good editors. So, like, for me, like, I need them to be okay.
Yeah.
So what do you think is going to happen in the next few years with Argentina, and how can you guys bring the country back?
I am, by definition, an optimistic person, and I love my country. I cannot be optimistic with the years to come, at least the next years, because of the problems that I'm describing. Argentina needs a change that is so radical that it's going to be tough. And I don't think people are culturally prepared for that. And we need reforms in the labor market, in the taxes, and in many things. And it's a cultural change. And I don't think that people are ready for that. And
if you were in Argentina and you were involved in all of those changes, what are some of the things that could be done? And like, if we can talk about like practical things, so how would that process go to try to get the country back on track?
I think for a country to succeed, there are many things. One thing is you need to favor investment. If you don't favor someone opening a company, then you're in trouble, because when you favor someone opening a company, that person will hire people, they will pay taxes, and they will create wealth and jobs, And my country is anti-company. It's anti-investment in many things, in many ways. We have corruption, we have high inflation, we have restrictions with the dollars, with transferring dollars outside the country. So who's going to put their dollars there if they cannot take them away? Like, you need to think like we human beings, when we start a company, we want to make profit. And that's fine. That's not a bad thing.
So they would have to eliminate the tax that they put when you send dollars in. And then what else could they do to help people open more businesses?
Well, at first, like, we have labor laws that if you fire someone, they can sue you and your company is at risk because the labor judges are pro-employee. And then you have a high risk of going bankrupt. And so what happens is people don't want to hire people. Company owners don't want to hire, because if I hire and I sue that, and if I need to fire that person, that happens. Someone doesn't work well or is not fit for the position, you have to fire that person to keep the company going. And if I fire someone and that person is going to sue me and probably win and I go bankrupt, in the first place, I don't hire. So the common phrase is, people don't hire an employee, they adopt an employee, and that's really bad, know. And how many, for example, I wanted to create a company. We wanted with my friends. This is a minor example. It's not representative, but just to give you an example, I wanted to create a company in Argentina with two friends to produce a beer. That was fun, like a side project, Mm-hmm. And when we started seeing the numbers, we're like, we cannot do this because we need to hire people, and if these people don't work well, we will need to fire them and we'll go bankrupt and I will lose my investment. So there are the incentives are not in place to favor companies that will hire people. And that's a big issue. That's one thing. Then the tax pressure in Argentina is one of the highest in the world, and you don't get any service for that. It's insecure in some places. The Then you need to probably send your children to private schools because the public schools used to be great, but nowadays they're not that great. So you're paying taxes for what, and so half of the population are evading taxes, and that's also a problem. A country needs taxes to operate, reasonable taxes. But a lot of the Argentine economy is operating in black markets, and that's, a country cannot operate like that.
But it feels like a lot of the countries lately are having all the same kinds of issues, and it's exhausting. Like, I don't even know how do we get out of that huge mountain of issues. And I don't know if it's the media or everything that we're talking about, but it's not just the media, because like all your friends and family and you experience this, like every country that I can think about right now. Like, what other country than America would you want to live? And even here in America, inflation is super high.
Yeah.
It's hard to get a job because of the same things that you're mentioning that happen in Argentina.
Yeah.
We don't have the same degree here in the US, but it's still happening. Like, it's very difficult for people to open a business because you're probably going to end up either losing all of your money or going into debt to get a loan to finance that business. And then you have to pay major taxes. Like, the first time that I learned that if you go over your tax bracket and you're making more than 300K, then they're going to come and take all of that. Like, that is insane.
Yeah.
Like, if you make $1 million, you're going to lose like 400K in taxes here in America.
Yeah.
How do we fix that?
It's a big issue. California has, the taxes in California are also insane. That's not a good thing. A lot of people are leaving California because of that. I know people that are really wealthy and they're leaving the state because of that reason. They're going to Florida, Texas, other places. And you want to keep those guys because those guys create companies. I know this is not, what I'm saying is not popular because,
But I think it is, Julio. Like, more and more people think this way. I don't think anyone is against this kind of thing. I do see that sometimes in America, especially here in California, people don't like big businesses because they think that big businesses are exploding people and all that. I have a complete different thinking about that. I think big businesses, I mean, unless they're doing illegal and unethical things to destroy their competition, which that should not be allowed.
Yeah.
But having entrepreneurs creating companies for profit and to make a lot of money is a good thing all across for everyone.
Of course.
Why do you think we keep thinking that is an unpopular opinion? Because like on the day to day, maybe on the internet, we think that people are going to be mad. But on a daily basis, how many people do you encounter that if you say, hey, I want my law firm this year to make like 50% more money so I can go and buy a bigger house, or I can go on vacation, or I can do whatever I want to do with the money? How many people would actually say, oh, you shouldn't worry so much about making like your business grow?
And zero. I don't engage with people that think that way. I in my life, like, I'm working really hard to make a good business, to help people, and also to grow my, like, in my personal life as well. If you take that away, that there's
What's
no
the
point.
point? Yeah.
So no, I don't have a problem with that. But when you see major media, social media, a lot of people, are against, are not pro-company. At least, for sure, in Argentina. I cannot say that in the U.S. The same extent, but in Argentina, if you speak out these ideas, you will have a lot of confrontations. Argentina is not pro-company, pro-investment, and that's one, in my opinion, of many issues that we have. And I don't have an issue, problems mentioning that. I think that's a good thing for my country. I want more job positions open, and I want more companies to go to do well for the reasons that we explained. And I wish the same for the U.S. So sometimes we see in immigration that it's not easy for companies to fill a position. For example, I was speaking the other day with the owner of a Texan company that they have these trucks that they transport the oil. And this person was not finding a truck driver in the U.S. market. She couldn't find any. And she said, I have my trucks that cannot operate, obviously, and I don't see, and I was like, I felt the situation, because there's not an easy way to bring someone from another country to drive the truck, because the visa is not, that specific visa is not easy. And so you have American companies that are, paralyzed or may go out of business because they cannot fill out that position. So yeah, it's a complex issue in general, I would say. But trust me, in comparison, the U.S. to Argentina, there's no point of comparison. And I've seen that in my country. So in a way, it resonated with me when you said I experienced these things in Cuba. So when I come here, I see things how they work, and I know let's be careful if we go this route because I've seen, I lived, and I suffered what happens when we go this route. And I can say the same, not to the same extent, because we don't have a dictatorship in Argentina. We have a democracy, a flawed democracy, but still a democracy. And I hope the current government goes away fast and we have a new government with new and fresh ideas. But I don't see, honestly, in the near future that we are culturally equipped and prepared for the changes that the country needs. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. I hope I am.
Yeah. Well, Julio, my last question always sounds a little bit like this.
Okay.
If you had all the money in the world
Yeah.
and you had all the time in the world and you could do anything with your life, what would you go and pursue?
That's tough. I mean, I can think of a lot of things, but I think I would try to do something that solves a big problem for humanity. So I would invest in research for cancer or something like that, I think. If I had like infinite funds, I would put a lot of effort probably in solving something like, not, I wouldn't say it's solving, but at least favoring a solution towards that. That is something that I would like to, and not with a lot of money or whatever, but it's a project that I have in my life for a few years from here to create something to help people in that sense with a serious illness or something like that.
That's exactly one of the things that I want to do.
I want to know. Tell me.
Yeah, well, my son had leukemia
Okay.
when he was 3, and we had the whole treatment, and it was about a 3-year process. So that's one of the things that I have on my bucket list, and one of the scripts that I'm working on is related to that whole story. And it's very interesting that you want to do that. Why do you want to go into that?
I was lucky enough that I didn't suffer anything like that in my family, but I think that we have limited time. Unlike the question, but we have limited time. We're not here for a long time. And when you have something like, I don't want to sound biblical, but it always resonated with me that this passage from the Bible that says, when you have talents, you have a responsibility to do things. That's why I think with the platform that I created, with the education that I was lucky enough to have, is what am I going to do with that? Opening a business and thriving, and that's great and beautiful, and I'm going to do that. But also, what else can I do? And for me, one of my many missions is try to help as many people as I can with what I have. Because at the end of the day, if you have that platform or those resources, and you can do that, I think it's a beautiful thing to pursue. But that's my point of view. I don't have an answer of why. I just feel that way. We'll see. What can we do in the future? But I'm working hard towards that.
That's very interesting. Well, Julio, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Axel. On the contrary, I'm grateful to be here and having this interesting conversation.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. If you liked it, please send it to a friend and share it with someone. I'm trying to do these conversations as often as I can so I get to meet interesting people like Julio, and I really appreciate your time. Check out this other episode that we have over here, and we'll see you on the next one.